Cool, and we are recording. Welcome back, gentlemen. How are we?
Good, thank you.
Good. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Glad we all got the memo. All wearing black. This is very good. Looking forward to getting a sharp haircut like Mike pretty soon. This lockdown, this lockdown Barnet is kind of it's tragic at the moment. So onwards and upwards. So last week we spoke about kind of our learnings from last year's events, our thoughts on how this year would be, the virtual event, the physical event, and broke down actually it's not that overwhelming when you break down the distance in kind of progressive overloading training distance and load. So I've got coffee in my hand. I think this week we're going to talk about reverse engineering or kind of working back from an endpoint and kind of and working out how to train that way. So I'll hand over to you guys to do a bit of chatting and we'll go from there. So Mike, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really just a case of um, asking asking Gus a few questions as we go along. Really, we've obviously got an initial. The current date for the marathon is the 23rd of October. Is that
Right.
right?
3rd of October.
3rd of October. Okay, so most people look forward rather than sort of working back, Gus. But how what's your process when someone comes to you into our clinic? Like, what's your sort of the steps you take to sort of help someone on that journey to getting over a finish line?
I use that exact word of journey, even though it might sound a bit cliche. But the reason for that is because it's similar to if you're going to do a physical journey, the time it's going to take is really dictated by where are you going, where are you starting from, and at what speed can you go. Now, fortunately for this discussion, there's a few fixed points. So the everyone is finishing or getting there, to the start line. If we say that's the aim, is the same for everyone on the 3rd of October. The rate at which you progress will vary a little bit, but we are constrained by biological processes and adaptation. And the best example I can give is pregnancy as a biological process. And no matter how hard you try, it's going to take about 9 months. And then the start point is the thing that we can vary. So you could start now if you wanted to, or you could start 4 weeks out from the marathon. I wouldn't advise doing that, but especially if it's your first one, but it's an option. But the point of I think today's discussion is trying to highlight what the advantages of trying to start earlier would be.
And what do you have is there a minimum in terms of like training for a marathon, or do you believe is it unique to everyone that comes through your door?
Yeah, so it'd be nice if I could give an exact numbers on everything for everyone and say if everyone follows these exact numbers and a 10% increase a week, then you'll be good. But unfortunately, the kind of first principle of training is individual differences. So even if there were two of me, I had a clone, and we both trained exactly the same. If the stresses on our life were slightly different, so one of me was getting a bit less sleep, more stress at work, lower mood, we would respond differently to the training program. So trying to then extrapolate that over thousands of people who would be doing a marathon and saying everyone follow the same kind of program isn't going to be possible. So I alluded to last time of getting a bit of a training diary, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal diary where you write everything down, but just keeping a log of, does certain things agree with you, does certain things not agree with you? When you go out and do an extra couple of miles, did that make you sore for a couple of days, or did it feel good? Did you notice that if you eat certain foods prior to training that you feel a bit rough? Like, this is a good learning opportunity now. And then it makes it a bit easier for people like me or a running coach or the person doing it to learn a little bit more about themselves, and then make those decisions on, okay, we can probably push a bit harder, or we can't push as much.
Yeah, I think that's I guess what we were talking about last week as well, was most people that start the journey get a generic program in front of them, and then they feel like they have to tick those sessions off in a very specific way every week at a set time. And I guess what you're saying is that it's more unique or more tailored to each person. So you talk about non-negotiables, like what sort of things do you ask people when you get into that?
When is the event is the most important one. Then when will you not be able to train? So that's not a question designed to catch people out or blame them for not being able to do it, but like, if you've got a skiing holiday booked, or you're going away for a period of time, or whatever reason, you know that you're not going to be able to do any training for a week, let's factor that in, because it means that if I know that you've got a week off, I could probably say, okay, that we can push you a bit harder the week prior to that, because you're going to have a week to recover before you got to go out again. We can still like benefit your training and manipulate the variables around it to get the most out of it, to make it as efficient as we can. And then another big question is, how many times a week is it realistic for you to train? And at the beginning, people are like, well, how many times do I need to train? Like, what do I have to do? And to get any kind of improvement, or to train for a marathon and be able to get the miles in, you're going to be looking at like probably 3 runs a week, maybe drop down to 2 on a couple of weeks, but most of the time 2 to 3 runs a week. Any less than that's probably not going to be enough. But most people at the beginning are very keen and very enthusiastic, and say, oh well, if I do 4 or 5, I can do 4 or 5 sessions a week. And it's like, well, maybe for this coming week you can, because we're in lockdown, there's nothing to do, and you're enthusiastic for it because it's at the beginning of the process. But when we're at 6-8 weeks in and things are starting to open up in life, and you're getting invites to the pub or to do something that like we haven't been able to do for months, and you've committed to doing 4 or 5 runs a week, and you've got a program that's based off that, it's not particularly useful then to try and cram that 5-day program into a 3-day program. So it's looking at the whole time you're going to be training for and saying, okay, what's realistic for me to do for that timeline?
Sorry guys, I think that's super reassuring advice, Gus. I think because a lot of first-time marathon runners, which we know 65-70% of people are, particularly London, they'll go on Google and type in London Marathon training plan, and they'll get hit with a million training plans.
Yeah,
and they are designed by generally runners who love running, who have got a history of training like runners, and it works for them. But they're asking people to run minimum 4 times a week, 4, 5, up to 6 times a week, and I think we know that doesn't work. And if most people, I did some research a couple of years ago, and the average was 2.7 runs a week. I researched on 2,000 London Marathon runners in 2016, and average was 2.7 times a week. So instead of getting the average person to not be able to commit and drive a huge amount of anxiety and stress into their lives of not being able to run 5 or 6 times a week, if we can reassure that you have to run 2 or 3 times a week to get the same return, significantly reducing chances of getting injured as well, it just takes away that anxiety and the excuse making as well in not to train. So I think it's super reassuring to say, if you can run 3 times a week consistently, and do it now. You've got time to do it. You have got time to train more now, but you don't need to. It's just about getting what can you commit to right this second and throughout. So super reassuring. I think on the money.
I was just thinking as well that this year everyone's going to have like 2-week holiday built in to go into the pub at around the 21st of June. So you should just have that as a standard bit built into everyone's program. Like no one's going to.
Yeah.
It's like a pre-training plan carb loading session. Carb loading.
The thing about the running 4, 5, 6 times a week, that's where it really is. Like, if you are conditioned to do that, that is fine. If this is your 10th marathon and you're really into running and you run really regularly, then that probably will work for you. But what we're trying to do is improve your performance, and performance is just how fit you are minus your fatigue. So if you're not conditioned to running and you go out and start running 4 or 5 times a week, you're not gonna your fatigue is going to outweigh the fitness that you get, and you'll probably get a negative. You actually do damage by getting those extra running. So yeah, definitely don't feel guilty about doing it. And even if that wasn't a factor, like, just going out and doing those extra 2 runs a week for a first time marathon runner is probably actually much more likely to be detrimental than beneficial.
Yeah.
And if you want to do more, I completely agree with Phil that, like, start now. Just start doing anything that you can enjoy. If you do it now, it makes that transition over time much more gentle. So if I quickly just share my screen with you guys, someone's going to need to allow me to.
And that'll be Phil.
To share my screen.
How do I do that?
It's in the bottom middle bit where it says share screen. You just there's a little arrow that you click up on.
We good?
Okay, right. So here I've got an overwhelming load of numbers on one side, which we can ignore for now. But if you just look at the graph here, you could see that if you started training on the 25th of April, which would be 21 weeks of training up until the week commencing the 12th of September. So roughly where you're going to peak. That the blue line is literally, I've just taken, you do nothing at the end of April. First week of May, you go out and run 1 mile for the week. And you just add 1 mile every week for 20 weeks. And that will get you up to 20 miles by the 12th, or the week commencing the 12th of September. So that line, when people say, build up slowly, it's quite vague advice. Whereas if you can try and like put in some idea of, okay, when would I have to start to build up slowly? What is slow? If you left it until middle of or early July, you would have to double the rate at which you increased your mileage. So it has to be an increase of 2 miles a week, every week for 10 weeks. And then, like, a general, not even a general rule of thumb, a convenient number to use, and it's no real more than that, is going at percentage increases week on week. So if you started again at the end of April and you just went out and did 3 miles that week. So if you wanted, we know that most people do, 2.7 runs a week. So somewhere between 2 and 3. So maybe go out and do 3 1-milers or 2 1.5 milers. If you just bumped up your mileage by 10% a week, every week from that point, the biggest ever jump you would have would be about 2 mile increase per week. And that would be going into your final week. But that would, again, have to start in basically late April, early May. And the point of this is basically to say, if you're doing anything now, you've got essentially, 2 months? Yeah, 2 months, so 8 weeks worth of training. And you don't need to worry about the miles, the speed, the frequency, the intensity, how long your run is. Like, you can literally go out and just get used to running a little bit. And it doesn't even need to be running. It could be run walks or just walking, or going out for, brisk walks for slightly longer periods than you would do. And now is probably a good time to do it, because what else are you going to be? Most people are going out for a walk at the weekend anyway. And you can use this just to learn a little bit before you start your training proper. And it gives you that, like, an 8-week period. Everyone in physio or strength and conditioning or doctors or whoever always refer to timelines, and it's almost always in 4-week blocks. So it's 4, 8, 12 weeks. You never get someone talking about 3 or 7 weeks. For some reason, it never happens. But 8 weeks is a nice amount of time. You get lots of adaptation by then. You would get very used to the impact of running. You would get changes on a biological level, on a cellular level, that would actually make it much easier for you to start this training program. If you did decide to start in May, and you're thinking, okay, well, my first week I need to go out and do somewhere between 3 and 4 miles, that would suddenly feel very doable compared to looking at your watch in July and thinking, oh, I've got to do 2 miles this week, but then I've got to double it next week, and then I've got to add another 2, and it just spirals out of control. And it's the orange line that tends to cause problems. And because you've condensed the training program, if something does go wrong, people like me and Mike just don't have the time to work with you and try and solve those. But it's about really is like patch you up, do whatever you can do to get through it, and it probably won't be particularly pleasant because it will be painful. Whereas if you had a problem if you started training now and you got a little bit of problem in late March, early April, you've got so much time that it probably won't affect your training too much. Basically, the earlier you start, the more time you give yourself, and the more enjoyable it'll probably be.
So right now, people just, like you say, people just need to enjoy it a bit and allow their bodies to get just some nice adaptations before they've even started the marathon training for proper, right?
Yeah. So like Mike, I know you do loads of cycling, and in your in all endurance sports, they refer to your first kind of block of training as a base phase.
Yeah.
And none of that in any training guide you ever read will be intensity, or it is literally just going out, and I'm assuming it's the same for cycling, just getting a few miles in your legs at really low, comfortable speeds.
Yeah, it's just about allowing the physiology of your body to catch, to make the changes. And there's certain things that happen at a lower intensity that then give you a building block to then build intensity at a later stage. So in a running perspective, from a cycling perspective, it tends to be about changes to like the mitochondria density within the muscle, other adaptations in terms of your delivery of oxygen to the muscle and so forth. But I'm sure it's the same within running. You still get those changes at the lower volume, but what the other aspect of the running at a lower intensity is that you get that adaptation to loading and changes within the tissue that then allow you to push on with your training to a later stage. Whereas, as we know, as physios and trainers, the tendons, connective tissue take a lot longer to make those changes. It all happens at a much slower pace. Same with bone as well. So that's where Gus's graph is good to see, because by ramping up the volume at a higher, quicker pace, those tissues don't have the adequate time to make the adaptations, and that's where you run this risk of the breaking down situation. That's how I see it, Gus. So I don't know if you want to add to that, or if I'm explaining it well, or
I'd agree with all of that, and coincidentally, the timelines for those kind of adaptations that Mike talked about load, which just refers to the amount of force that goes through your joints when you run. So the tendons and the connective tissue typically take around 8 weeks to adapt. So if you were looking at a training program that's 12 weeks long, which a lot of these training programs are, like for the 2/3 of it, your body's not adapted or conditioned to do that. And you're just trying to condense something that has got a fixed speed. Doesn't matter what you do, that won't adapt quicker. You're trying to force it to. And that is, for me, it's like 99% of the runners I see are people who don't know. It's not people who tripped over and sprained their ankle. They're the 1%. It's the people who have say, I've got no idea why my knee hurts, but I can't run at the minute, and you question them, and they've essentially, their graph is just a massive spike in what they're used to doing, and their body can't adapt quick enough.
Yeah. So I guess the key is start early, start slowly, and it doesn't need to be intense at the beginning. We can build intensity in as we go if we need to. If your goal is to get a better time, then intensity becomes more important. But volume and building gradually is the key to the early phase, at least. So, but you've got to make a start. We keep saying that. Make a start. Get going.
No, just making a start. This is all really good, digestible advice, guys, and it makes a lot of sense. Look, everyone loves to struggle. Honestly, people like spinning plates and struggling and making things more. It's last minute cramming of an exam. It never does anyone any good. We should always tell ourselves, never again. We've got the opportunity now to not be a martyr in our training, and honestly, there's nothing worse when those marathon photos are presented to you at the end of your marathon and you're in pain. There's visible discomfort. You're hating your life. Look, it hurts everyone at some point. But it should be as enjoyable as possible. So let's not be a martyr. Let's start early. Great advice, guys. And I think I've got nothing more to add, really. I thought that was great. And we've got more good stuff to come. So Gus, that was great. I appreciate that, mate. It's good to visually see what needs to be done.
And it's almost like permission to not go out and kill yourself on a run. You won't gain anything. You'll get all those adaptations from really slow runs. Elite level runners spend most of their time barely above a walk. There is no rationale to go out and kill yourself for 5 days a week, because it won't sustain.
Perfect. Mic drop. Love it. All right, gentlemen, we'll wrap it up there, I think. Really appreciate that. That's awesome. And we will jump on a call next week and carry on with content. All right.
We're talking about benchmarking next week. So where you are currently at and what the best ways to measure that are and how to move forward from there.
Perfect. Awesome. Gentlemen, a pleasure. Thank you so much for that. And speak to you next time.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.